all designers, and it's South by. Maybe we don't talk about this. Maybe we talk about crypto, Web3, like every other fucking place here. All right, we won't. Cool. So, and it works. Anyway, I'd like to thank South by Southwest, Michigan House for having me today, and all of you for being here. There's a lot of sessions that are happening, so I really appreciate you taking the time to come here today. So, this is not working. Boom, we're gonna go old school. All right, that's me before I shaved 2 or 3 weeks ago, so I apologize. I've been in the design industry for over 20 years, and I've been really focused on ethical design for at least the last decade, right? So for me, I started out working in healthcare design at 3M. And what I did in healthcare were really building physical and digital solutions for patients, payers, providers, everything from oral care to drug delivery systems to food safety, and eventually enterprise software. After that, I led the AIGA Minnesota Director of Design Impact there, where we were focused on design for good and sustainable design. And those committees reported to me. And then the last few years I've been in finance, right? So first in banking, helping people have a better relationship with their money. And then now I'm at Rocket, where we help people achieve that dream of homeownership. So let me tell you why this is important to me. And it all starts with this motherfucker. How many of you know who Bat Boy is? Handful. So I'm gonna share a really personal story, even though it started out as a joke. So one of my first jobs out of school was working with this lovely newspaper, along with all of the other trash magazines like The Sun, The Star, The Inquirer, Weekly World News, The Globe. I was responsible for the final output of all of that. And in 2001, when I worked there, we were subject to the first anthrax attack in the United States. Somebody they mailed this package with a picture of J-Lo and a soapy substance, and our photo editor opened it. And nobody realized anything. He went on vacation, and then he died. And nobody really knew what happened. So they installed a PA system, they did all sorts of weird things. There were people in hazmat suits taking swabs of our desk, and they're like, don't worry, it's just precautionary. I went home Friday night, the last person out of the building, and that Monday morning, my dad called me and he's like, hey, you gotta go down to the health department. Your company's on the news. And I'm like, that's weird. So the anthrax they found in 2,000 spots in our building. So I went down to the health department, and they were like, hey, sign this paperwork. And I'm like, all right. They're like, we'll take care of you if anything happens, but you can't sue us. I'm like, all right, I don't want to die. Like, I'll sign the paperwork. So they put us in this ballroom in Delray Beach, Florida, and they had the FBI, the CDC, and Florida Department of Health, and they came in and they said, we honestly don't know if you were gonna live or die. Like, we've never had this happen. This was before it hit the news outlets and the politicians, like we were first. So we're going to put you on Cipro for 60 days because we saw this outbreak of anthrax in Russia in the 60s, and spores stay dormant for 58 days. So we'll test you, we'll give you the medication, and you should be okay, we think. So I remember I got tested, they gave me my medication, I went home, and they're like, hey, everything's fine, right? You hear the special alert tone on the news, and then you realize another one of your coworkers is hospitalized, and they call you back, and they're like, oh, just joking, those tests were inconclusive. Come back in for another round next week. So this went on for 60 days, and although it has really nothing to do with anything that we were gonna talk about, that's the trigger for me. That's like, at some point as a designer, that fear and anxiety that was caused by miscommunication or process or anything, like, I can fix that. I can try to fix that. So I'm fortunate now that maybe not that directly, but I have the opportunity to work on things that impact people in a positive way. So I'm gonna tell you another story, but first I'm gonna drink this. All right, so when I was a kid, I grew up watching the Jetsons. Anybody else watch the Jetsons? Yeah, Like having your fucking suitcase, briefcase, car thing, like how cool is that, right? It's 2022 yet, we don't have flying cars, right? I totally thought we'd be here by now. We're not even close. And the reason we're not close is because this is super unsafe, right? I mean, it's just not safe. So speaking of cars, let's look at the history of automobiles. That's Mary Ward. In 1869, Mary Ward, who was an Irish naturalist and author, she was riding with her family in a steam-powered automobile like they do in that time. And she was thrown from the vehicle as it was rounding a curb. And she ended up falling out of the car in the path of the vehicle. And she broke her neck and died instantly. This was the first recorded automobile fatality. And I know what you're thinking. What about seatbelts, right? Seatbelts didn't exist back then. And you would think, all right, by like 1870 then, there'd have to be seatbelts, right? No, there weren't. So fast forward to 2016, May of 2016. This is Joshua Brown. He was an entrepreneur. He was driving his Tesla Model S in autopilot mode, and it failed to properly identify and brake as this tractor trailer turned in front of him. So as the tractor trailer went in, he hit the truck, veered off the road, struck two fences and a power pole. He died on the scene. There are still no calls to stop the technology. We just move forward. And what do we say? Well, innovation, right? This is expected, this happens. We fully haven't determined how to make things safe yet. So it's really not uncommon if we think about just automobile technology. I promise this talk isn't about cars or crypto. Shatterproof glass was created in 1903, but it wasn't regulated until 1928. Crumple zones in the cars that impact the way they handle crashes were created in 1937, but didn't get regulated until 1959. Three-point seatbelts like we use today, it took 11 years for them to become regulated. And airbags. Airbags were created in 1953, but it took 45 years to actually be regulated, right? This isn't uncommon because in our digital world, things go from idea to concept and then they become adopted. They're not regulated or governed until things go horribly wrong. And it takes time for these policies, these standards to be established. But we focus on making things safer for people, right? At least we think we do. Not all people. You know, these tests, the crash test dummies that they use for tests with women in the passenger seat, they're not done. The dummy that they use to represent women is really just a scaled down male. And that lacks the internal morphology. It lacks what distinguishes the sexes. And they don't vary for bone density, and they don't vary from muscle structures and abdominal and chest differences. So we've known this for 40 years, yet we just keep this in place, a structure that puts women at greater risk than men. So why am I talking about this? Well, the truth is people we design for, us, people want to feel safe and secure. Safety is this basic human right? But there's a ton of shit going on that doesn't allow people to be safe. It seems that we're constantly hearing of new breaches from all industries. It's pretty fucked up. Not all of these are the fault of the company, right? We know that. But customers don't always understand that. We've all made mistakes in the past. We've all learned from them. But people don't think, hey, maybe it was the designer that made a mistake. Hey, maybe it was a data breach that we couldn't control. They're like, nope, that company, Facebook, Target, Yahoo, it's their fault. And I'm not saying that any of these could have been avoided by design. But what I am saying is that people really do deserve to feel safe, and design plays a big part in that. So, if you think about what it means for a product to be safe and make people feel safe, safe products are designed so that they can minimize emotional, economic, physical, and psychological harm to any human being or to society. Right? It's not that hard. But we talk about minimizing these things because we can't completely control them. We can't take the harm completely out of them. Mistakes happen, things happen, people use things in a bad way, but we can do our best to make it as minimal as possible. So we all know this, right? On Saturday morning, January 13th, 2018, a ballistic missile alert was issued by the emergency alert system and the commercial mobile alert system over television, radio, and cell phones in Hawaii. And the alert said, there's an incoming ballistic missile attack to Hawaii. It advised the residents to seek immediate shelter. And it says this is not a drill. Think about that. Think about if we got that with everything going on in the world today, right? If we just got, all of our phones got an alert that a missile was coming. Like, what the we'd shit our pants. Like, what the fuck would we do? But this happened to people, right? And 38 minutes later, think about that. By the time this talk is done and you guys are having more drinks, you finally get the all clear, right? Because we'd all be drinking. Like, we're all gonna die, let's drink. So, you know, state officials, they're like, we're sorry. It was a miscommunication during a drill. Like, for almost an hour, people weren't aware that this wasn't gonna happen. So, was this a design problem? Maybe, right? So at the start of each shift, an operator comes in, they look at the alert system, they retrieve this list of, like, this list. It's templates, right? And they pick one from this list of 9. This time, the one they picked was this one instead of this one, right? I mean, the word drill is pretty obvious, but what the fuck, right? All caps, all caps. Like, I go to the grocery store and I'm like, I really want these Ritz crackers, the garlic butter ones, and I'm like talking to my wife and I'm like, I see it, it's right here. I'm like, I'm gonna grab it, I put it in the cart, I get home and I'm like, what the fuck, I picked the bacon ones? Like, what's wrong? How did I miss that? So if I can miss the Ritz crackers, like, it's real easy to click this button here over this one. The only difference is the word drill. This is an information architecture problem, right? I mean, literally we can organize this list better so that people don't make mistakes. In this case, it was a design error that caused this fear and panic. But hey, we learned from this, right? Fuck no, we didn't. In June, this past June, an evacuation alert meant for a small group of people at a resort in Minnesota was mistakenly sent to residents of multiple counties. A main gas line was cut, it prompted this evacuation, and the alert was specifically for those people at the resort. But the message got broadcast over all the emergency alert systems, all the TV, all the radio, all the phones. And then the sheriff said, hey, just kidding. Like, it wasn't for everyone, that wasn't for you guys, it was for someone else, just go ahead. They said anyone not in this island resort can ignore it. We're working to resolve the issue at that time. We apologize for any inconvenience. We're sorry, you just left all your shit, your kids, your dogs, whatever, you ran out. You went and hit the bar because you thought like you're in trouble, and instead, we're just kidding, go back. It's crazy, but maybe this is why, right? I mean, only half of the Americans really feel that technology companies are making a positive impact. You know, the share of Americans who hold this view continue to decline year over year. This used to be 71% like 3 or 4 years ago. I wonder why, right? How about the Apple Card? Who's got an Apple Card? Okay, all right. So the thing with the Apple Card, right? We love Apple, I love Apple. The brands we trust, they make mistakes. So the Apple Card, at some point, decided that they were gonna give higher balances to men over women, right? This guy, he's like, it's a fucking sexist program. His wife and him share all their resources and, you know, whatever. He got a 20x credit limit than her. All right, cool, one guy, it happens, right? No, the fucking founder of Apple had the same thing happen to him, right? He's got 10x the credit limit of his wife, but they have the same bank account, the same credit cards, no separate assets. And he couldn't get a human on. He couldn't talk to a human. Did you ever try to call support on the Apple Card? Like, it's an iMessage that they respond like 3 or 4 days later. And if it's some, and they're quicker, right? They'll respond, but they won't solve your problem. And then finally it takes like 3 billing cycles to get a refund. So, I mean, this is crazy. Why do things like this happen? Well, this is very common, right? Let's create a thing. We can create everything, but should we is the question. So here's the thing, and this is got some audio, but the audio is kind of shitty. But sometimes we leverage technology for the wrong reasons.
China has added a special effect to a glass-bottomed walkway. Using sensors and other tricks, the glass floor appears to shatter as tourists walk on the bridge, which hangs close to 3,900 feet above sea level along a mountain cliff. But for those who don't know it's a trick, it could be a terrifying experience. Footage posted by People's Daily Online shows one man who appears to be a tour guide stumbling over and falling to his knees in fear as the glass panel cracks under his feet. The 10-second long video has gone viral on social media, with some calling the feature funny, while others say it's just cruel. Sensors have been installed to detect any human movement, so the cracks follow your steps as you walk. The local government has issued an apology for the scare, but doesn't plan to replace the panels with regular ones because they want visitors to come and experience them. For United News International in Tokyo, I'm Rumi Fukushima.
Okay, so imagine not knowing and walking on that, right? Who would design this and say, that's a great idea, like let's scare the shit out of people as they walk on this glass bridge, right? Who thinks that's a good idea that they would do that for some reason? But I mean, yes, people figured out quickly that it's a joke, but you know, I mean, just think about what we do, right? So these are a list of technologies that may or may not have been understood, and yeah, it's got blockchain, but like Web3 I could fit in there or some shit. Anyway, you know, as designers, yeah, we did Web 2.0, right? Like the web's not that old yet. We've got 3 versions of it, and I don't know that we've actually learned anything along the way. But these technologies that we've had to design for, we've had to figure out what they do while we're designing for them, while we're in the moment, right? So it's hard to know, to understand how much harm something can cause when it's so new and you're so in it. So we can argue that need for speed, right? But we know that when we go too fast, it starts to blur the purpose. It starts to affect really, like, are we human-centered, right? Maybe we need to slow down. Maybe we don't need to slow down so that design's the bottleneck that takes 4 months to get something done. But maybe we need to slow down and see the impact of our work in the world and the people whose lives that we're affecting. So, did I miss any technologies here? Maybe, I don't know, flying cars, right? We already covered that. So, Facebook, right? Like, we're gonna talk a lot of shit. Is anybody here from Facebook? Anybody? Okay, good. I kind of wish someone was. We're gonna talk a little shit about them. Anyway, so in today's world of artificial intelligence, natural language processing engines, what John Maeda always calls computational design, this is a message that someone got on Facebook, right? It tells you all your top stories, your most likes that you got. So imagine you post that your mother died and Facebook's like, yeah, you got a lot of likes here. Let me put this character that literally dances across this photo of your mother's grave. Who the fuck thought that was a good idea? Like, I don't know. And what happens? What do? We say, well, we programmed, we designed the algorithm. It takes a human being to design an algorithm. We know that technology by itself doesn't have a conscience. It doesn't have context. It doesn't have a soul. Technology is an enabler. Design helps people apply technology in a meaningful way. So Alan Cooper says the individuals who create some of the most oppressive systems are mostly good people, right? They're doing good work for seemingly good reason, yet what they're creating can turn against us without anyone purposefully willing that to happen. Now, think about that. There's nobody at Facebook that's like, I'm gonna fuck everybody over, right? There's no way. Like, I don't believe that. I believe the intent is there. It's just in the execution that people don't really think about all the opportunities that they have or the people that should be used in building and testing these products. But Spotify and their design team, they talk about there being 3 different types of harm, right? For at least for the people that we design for. So they talk about physical harm. When we think about physical harm, think about the device that you use, right? think about the websites. There was this period where everybody was parallaxing, and I know I'm still figuring out the mic. I should be holding it here so it's a lot clearer. Man, this guy was giving me that stink eye for like 15 minutes. I apologize. No. So it just feels like I should be rocking out, but I will. So remember those parallaxing sites that everybody loves? Well, I have a friend that has vertigo, and when she scrolls those sites, it really, like, she's like nauseous from it. What about addictive UI, infinite scrolls, right? The auto-cued videos that we finally don't have to deal with every time we go on Facebook because it wakes up the whole house and they decide to play the ad so loud. All of these things are competing for your attention. Accidents. Remember when people got the phones and they were walking and falling into like the fountain at the mall? Like we're past that now, thankfully. But I promise you there are people out there that are still tripping over shit. So, especially when driving, right? And Apple's learned, they put the I'm driving feature, but we're talking about this attention, but we're causing physical harm by that attention. You know, Joshua's automobile accident that I talked about earlier, that cost him his life, right? That's physical harm. You can kill somebody. Then there's emotional harm. And we see this, the examples, the betrayals of trust, the betrayals of privacy. There's a fucking squirrel. There's a squirrel over here. I live in North Carolina. I got squirrels in my backyard. That one. No need to go down the squirrel hole. Anyway, oh, there he goes again. He's gonna jump. He's going for you. I promise. He's gonna end up in your lap. So think about the betrayal of trust or privacy, right? When people are exploited, when they're exposed, when they're discriminated against using personal information that they thought was private. How about exposure to personal identifiable information? Anybody here ever been a victim of credit card fraud, right? It's the worst. I'm sorry that happened. I mean, it's terrible, right? Whenever your information is taken, it's really an interesting moment, right? How about those apps that can share your location? I'm sure you saw, like if you look at your Google history, it will tell you every day, like what time you go to the whatever, pick up your kids from school, whatever you do. What about negative self-image, right? Anxiety, depression, young people, their minds, their bodies, their identities are still being developed, and they tend to crave social acceptance. Yet they're going through so much, and there's so many ways that they're being bullied or targeted, and it's a lot. And then societal. And this is when we talk about, we're in an election year again, yay, right? I mean, political polarization. Again, algorithms that flatten the landscapes of journalism so that they drive these news agencies to compete against each other with sensationalism, and that contributes to a divided society. Or exclusion, when we fail to develop features that are sensitive to the experiences of underrepresented users, or consider those with mental or physical disabilities. So Harry Bricknell created a term called dark patterns, which was meant to it's a way that we've described people over the years. I don't love to use dark patterns as a term, so I'm gonna use harmful patterns. But as designers, there are ways that we've tricked people throughout the years. You know, sometimes we design screens, and they're these interactions, and they're meant to achieve a specific result. So there's a story behind this, but I'm gonna have another drink quick before it gets too watered down. So this pumpkin, so the photo I had before I shaved, I had a pretty decent beard. Now I don't. But in the fall I did, and you bet your ass I wanted some pumpkin spice beard oil, because I fucking love pumpkin spice. I'm seasonal a million times. So I went to this site. I'm like, holy shit, Black Label beard oil. I'm gonna get, and you know, they're made in Texas. Not that that means anything, but we're here, so. I went and I was like, I need this shit. Like, I need to smell like pumpkin spice. Even though I'm not leaving my house, we're still in a pandemic, I need to smell that shit through the day. So I jumped on this site and they're like, look, we sold 6 in the last 24 hours. I'm like, cool, people are buying it. 75 of 100 are sold. Oh shit, there's only 25 left. 10 people are viewing it. That means there's 15 left, really. And that shit ends. It ends in like 12 hours. I gotta buy this, right? I'm ready to jump in and buy it. So I have the Mac that has the touch bar. How many of you have hovered over the touch bar and some shit happens, who knows what? So I reached over it, I hovered it, refreshed the page. All the fucking numbers were different. They literally were tricking me. They almost had me. I was ready. I had my credit card, and that hover was like, there's a lot. I got more. I have more opportunity. Same price though, $8. I mean, $8. It can't be that good, but no one else had pumpkin spice at the time. So someone thought that by tricking me into a quantity left would force me to buy, and we do that if you work in e-commerce a lot. But the more you think about it, I will never buy from this company again. I'm lying, I bought the candy cane beard oil. But seriously, like, I wasn't happy, right? But anyway, that just that will ruin trust with your users. That will ruin trust with people that you want to give you money over time. This tactic, it's still used today. I shit you not, right? I went to go buy, aside from pumpkin spice, I went to buy Taylor Swift's album, right? So, one-time offer available, 14 hours, 4 minutes, 33 seconds. Well, I refreshed the page, watch the clock, 31, 30, 29, 28. Oh shit, back to the original time. Where'd those 30 seconds go? So, I don't know, maybe technology by session, but still, like, did I buy that? Yes, I did. But I hated it enough to put it in this deck. So, you know, it's one of those things. So did it really affect the user? Maybe. But I'll tell you what, whoever did that, they'll probably do it again. So we're back to pumpkin spice, right? I mean, I wish it was still the fall. I don't know what a spring scent is. Do they make Peeps flavored anything? Peeps scented? I don't know. Who likes Peeps? Anybody? They have chocolate covered Peeps at CVS, and they're actually pretty good. They're not really Peeps in there. They're just chocolate covered marshmallow that's yellow. But anyway, so spoiler alert. I bought pumpkin spice deodorant. I swear to God. I also bought candy cane deodorant, and I bought Christmas cookie deodorant from a company called Native. Anyone ever hear Native? Native's all natural, right? So they're not gonna screw me. They're gonna be legit. I bought pumpkin spice deodorant, and it came, it was fine. I got an email. Hey, you bought pumpkin spice deodorant? Maybe you want candy cane deodorant. All right, maybe I do. Next day, hey, maybe you want like Santa's Christmas cookie deodorant. Well, that's pushing it a little bit. I love Christmas, but you know, whatever. The next day, I got another email. Maybe you want this lavender. It's like, no, maybe I want you to leave me the fuck alone. But the same day, I got another email. Another one, like, hey, we also have body wash. Great. I'm gonna unsubscribe because this is too much. So I went to unsubscribe. I got this email. I have 2 dogs. The last thing in the world that I want to do is make Muppet sad. But, Muppet, you're sending me too many fucking emails. So I decided to unsubscribe, and I did, right? I let go. Where would someone think that guilting somebody into unsubscribing would be a great design pattern to use? Well, just like anything else, we learned that shit from Facebook. Facebook, back in the day when you wanted to deactivate your account, they would tell you, are you sure? Because Bridget's gonna miss you. Megan's gonna miss you. Chris will miss you. I don't even fucking know Chris, right? Jennifer will miss me. I went to school with Jennifer when we were in 3rd grade. I don't even know why I'm connected to Jennifer anymore. Fernanda and her 2 kids? I don't know how many kids Fernanda has, but they're gonna all miss me, right? They've removed this feature now because of public shaming. As designers, we have to understand the potential consequences of our actions. Wait till you see the next slide. I bring these guys up a lot because they've done a lot of shit that doesn't make sense. So in 2014, Facebook decided it would make a lot of sense to run an experiment with a small subset of their users. Really small subset of their users. 600,000 people. And they took their news feed and they filled it with nothing but negative news. Right? Let's see what happens if we just show people the worst possible shit they'd ever want to see if it has any effect on their mental health. Without their consent, with no way to opt out. Not even for someone that has mental health issues. I love that he got a photo of me pointing to Facebook as I'm shitting on them, and now I'll probably get whatever. Facebook, you could do a better job. So, yes, craziness, right? But have we learned from that? Of course we haven't. I mean, we're designers. I hope we're learning from this. So, New York Times, they announced last year that they were going to abandon their Facebook group with over 77,000 members. The group throughout the pandemic had gotten really, really ugly, right? They've had debates that involve class and race and privilege. And the members of this group, 77,000 of them, were like, please, can you moderate this? It's really important that we moderate this because we know that moderation is a way that we can tackle and we can prevent some harm. Instead, the New York Times says, we're just gonna drop it. Does anyone else in the public want to take over as a moderator so we can remove our name and our brand from this? Who does that? You know, again, one of the main ways that you can keep an online community safe is through moderation. And there needs to be policies and governance models. We love governance. We're not, as designers, like you can think we don't love governance, right? But how many of you have a design system? That shit's a form of governance, right? That makes sure that people aren't misusing things, that the brand isn't harmed in any way. We need governance for when things like this happen. So, also last year, Slack, they decided they were going to release a feature that lets you send a DM called Connect DM, so you can send a message to any Slack user that you want. Not the people that you work with, but literally anyone on Slack. So I don't know who thought that was a good idea, but I'm sure it was someone that had never been harmed online, someone that had never been harassed online, someone that has never been sent unsolicited messages, because surely if they had, they wouldn't have created this feature. Do you know who saved the day? The internet. Not Web3, not whatever. The users of the internet said, hey, here's all the things that could go wrong. And then Slack said, hey, you know what? Maybe we should roll this back. But the feature still exists today. It's not completely rolled back. So I don't know what they've really done. All right, so we've done some shitty things. But I really believe that design is a superpower, right? No matter where you are in your career, being a designer is a privilege because you're in a position that you can really make a difference, right? When you have the opportunity to make that impact, it's inspiring. And when you make a positive impact and you leave things better than you found them, like that's what it's all about, right? Designers always recognize there's a way to improve the current state. We know this. And to do so with meaningful context really showcases that power of design. And by choosing to be a designer, you're choosing to impact people who come in contact with your work. And you can either help them or hurt them with your actions. Whatever we work on, the tools that we create, the solutions, the products, the services, the NFTs, right? Who's creating NFTs? Anyone? Anyone? Not in this group. Fuck yeah, these are my people. Whatever you work on, whether functional, emotional, or in my current case, financial, we impact people. And the stakes are higher than they've ever been before because it's not just pixels anymore. It's not just that time that I was working on the weekly world news. We're designing applications. We're designing entire organizations, ecosystems. We're solving complex problems. We are affecting people's lives, their relationships, their mental state. We're addressing things like injustices, inequalities, algorithmic biases. These are things that we're focused on as a design community. Designers have a privilege or a burden of really wielding a lot more power than we've ever had in the existence of this profession. When we do our job well, we make people's lives better. So, forget being a designer for a minute. As a human being, every person on this planet should strive to do their best, right? So that we can leave this planet or any other as we potentially go to Mars or wherever, right? In better shape than we found it. So we're going to talk about a couple of other things. Ethics. We hear this word thrown around a lot. Yes, I work at Rocket, and yes, dictionary.com is one of our family of companies, so you're damn sure I'm going to use them as the dictionary definition. So when we look at that, ethics is a system of moral principles, right? They're values relating to human conduct with respect to the rightness and wrongness of certain actions, and I don't have to read the rest for you, you can fucking read. How many of you or your teams have your own set of personal design principles? You don't have to raise your hand, just think. How many of you have your own values, your own philosophy that you really think of? All right, so we're in a decent place with ethics, but how do we tie that to what we do? It's another lengthy one. So we'll give you a second to read it. I'll have another drink, finish this one. And as we, oh, maybe you can't see it. I don't know if you can. I'll read it in case you can't see it. So design ethics guide how designers work with clients, colleagues, and the end users of our products, how they conduct the design process, how they determine the features of products, and how they assess the ethical significance or moral worth of the products that result from the activity of designing. Do you have that moral line in the sand when you design your products? Think about it. And let's talk about another thing that's really important, our environment. So when we think about sustainable design, right, we're trying to eliminate negative environmental impact through this skillful and sensitive design, right? Think about this. Sustainability is really thought of as what can be continued into the future. What's the impact of our work on the world's environment, resources, and climate, and people, right? Think about yourself 15 years ago. Now think about yourself, maybe you're in the same, physical health, hopefully. Maybe your eyesight's gotten a little worse. Maybe your hearing, who knows? Think about yourself in 15 or 20 years from now. As you're designing products today, why are we not designing for our future selves? Why are we not understanding that in 15 years from now, it's gonna be harder to see a little bit. It's gonna be maybe a little bit harder to hear. It's gonna be harder to function in certain ways. We have to think about that. We have to future-proof everything that we can do. So let's think about sustainable design for a second and talk about this. How many people have heard of play pumps before? Anybody? No, great. Play pumps provided water for African villages. And this sounded like a marketing dream, right? They got celebrities and presidents, even Jay-Z invested in this. Children play on this merry-go-round. And as they do, water is pumped from the ground to store in an elevated tank. We'll ignore the child labor and safety aspect of it, right? As these kids are playing, the recommended minimum daily water requirement is about 15 liters per person. I'll be honest, I don't know how much 15 liters are. If it was in gallons, I'd probably understand it more. But anyway, 15 liters per person. Based on the pump's capabilities, these kids would have to play for 27 hours a day to get the right amount of water. Now, I suck at math, admittedly, but I know there's not 27 hours in a day. so it's not producing enough water. And it turned out for the cost of one of those, you could provide 4 regular wells with a hand pump. And every time that pump broke, it was a lot cheaper to fix than it was to this. So, sorry, Jay-Z. I know you're watching, I see it. But failure. As designers, we know not everything goes as planned, right? The UN has this list of sustainable goals. I'm gonna play it. So these are really good goals. These are truly wicked problems that we can get behind. We're all designers, right? Everyone's still in the back. Everybody designers, or maybe not. Yep, perfect. My people are still here. Did anyone else bothered by the fact that those weren't even in fucking order? I don't understand. But again, great cause, really important. Something that we should really focus on. So let's talk about something else. Let's talk about universal design. This is how we can design products and environments to be usable by all people to the greatest extent of possible without the use of any adaptation or specialized design, right? So what does that mean? When you think about that, think about a sidewalk with a curb cut, right? That's an example of a universally designed product. It makes it easier for anyone, whether you're in a wheelchair, whether you've got a walker, whether you've got a stroller or a shopping cart, or really anyone, right? Because we're looking at our phones and we don't want to trip. So that's universal design. Another example, are the doors that open automatically. When I worked at 3M, I'm just gonna bitch about this for a second. They had these doors, and like, they said push, pull, whatever. Like, I don't know, maybe they didn't even say anything, but they had handles on both sides. Everyone's like, all right, go, walk. Nope, you can't push. All right, you can pull this one. Like, I don't know. I don't know how doors are supposed to work, but I think as I'm trying to go out, I want to push. But it didn't work, and it had handles on both sides. So the doors that open automatically, that prevents that. That prevents me from walking into the wall. We'll talk about accessible design because this is really important, right? When we think about accessibility, according to the World Bank, there's over 1 billion people that have some sort of disability or different ability, which makes them the world's largest minority. In the US, 1 in 5, 20% of the population have some sort of disability. A lot of companies have paid attention to accessibility because they've been sued, right? Target, $6 million. Morgan Stanley, 9. Wells Fargo, 16. As we think about designing for people who have different abilities, designing from an accessibility first standpoint, it has the ability to benefit people, not just with disabilities, but anyone, because it delivers a better user experience. And a lot of products that we use today were originally created for people who have disabilities. Texting. was originally developed as a way for the deaf to communicate without a phone. The telephone itself, remember those things? It was created by Alexander Graham Bell out of this desire to create a hearing device because both his wife and his mother were hard of hearing. What about audiobooks? How many people listen to audiobooks? Those were originally created for people who, were visually impaired. Voice command technology, that's been extremely helpful for blind people. The fidget spinner was created for kids who were autistic as a way to help them kind of hone in on something. And even one of my favorite devices of all time, the Snuggie, was originally created for people that were in a wheelchair. So Apple, which is a company that was also on that list that had been sued for accessibility at some point, has really been raising the bar for what it means to design accessible features. I'm gonna play another video real quick.
People think that having a disability is a barrier. But that's not the way I see it. You can catch up with friends.
Ready?
You can capture a moment with your family.
One face, small face, focus lock.
And you can start the day bright and early. You can take a trip to somewhere new. You can concentrate on every word of a story.
A bird began to sing. Jack opened his eyes.
You can take the long way home. Or edit a film like this one. When technology is designed for everyone, it lets anyone do what they love, including me.
So let's talk about inclusive design for a minute, right? This is another term that we're hearing a lot lately, and we should, right? Designers and companies are making inclusive design as a focus, and to a lot of us, this is relatively new. This term's been around for over 15 years. It's how we can make products or services usable by as many as people as possible. Again, similar design, right? So think about this. Think about when we talk inclusive design. I'm gonna show you an example. So I don't know how many people have seen this soap dispenser before. So it also has sound.
Okay, go ahead. You try now. Come to your hand. Two black. Two black. Yeah. Come again. Come again, Sash. No, you two black over with.
But as a dude, they get. What do you have to do? Like how racialist thing is. Yeah. As long as that piece of white. That's a napkin. I'm sure it is. Again. Napkin again. Right. What's it called on a hand?
Man, black man getting fine.
Black man getting
all
fine.
over. Oh boy.
So this doesn't only happen with soap dispensers. This happens with facial recognition cameras at airports. This happens with companies like Microsoft with the Xbox Kinect. This has happened with algorithms with Google Photos. This is, when you say, I didn't know, I didn't mean to, that's not good enough anymore. It's 2022, right? If you don't understand the people that are using your products, and you don't have people involved in testing or building the products, right? Like, we're designers, we're inclusive, it's collaborative. People should be building products that are gonna be using them. If you can't get that one thing right, I mean, fuck it. Like, you don't deserve to call yourself a designer. Our job is to be inclusive and collaborative by nature, right? So if we're not doing that, something's wrong. As designers and as human beings, it's your obligation to respect every other human being on this planet and their time, their intentions, their privacy, and their intelligence. Victor Papanek says that you're responsible for what you put out into the world, and you're responsible for the effects that those things have on the world. So think about it, right? All right, you may follow a pattern that's harmful, but Andy, I'm just a designer. What's gonna happen to me? How many of you have heard the name James Liang before? Nobody, great. So James was an engineer. He worked at Volkswagen for over 20 years. James was a company man. In 2017, James was sentenced to 40 months in prison because he designed software that cheated emissions tests. So when you think about what could happen to you if you don't pay attention and be responsible, you can go to jail for this, right? So how do we embed responsibility into our process? We need to ask ourselves and our partners to create guidelines for our products. So we're all designers, and although we've literally seen 400 different ways that illustrate processes of how we work, we all work the fucking same way. So just to align on some terminology, right? We're gonna identify a problem. What problem are we trying to solve? Who are we solving it for? Who are those users? How will they use it? What's the context? How it will actually be used as opposed to how it was intended to be used? You know, in healthcare, when I was in healthcare, we spent time visiting hospitals, and what we saw as we visited these hospitals are people were using our software, and instead of like a good way to communicate, they were printing things out with patient health information. They were taking screenshots because they didn't understand. And it wasn't that they were trying to be malicious in any way. We didn't create a way for them to do it. So what they did, like the gentleman that was using the white paper towel, you find a workaround that works. So we found that they were using this as a way to offset what we couldn't do for them in our products. And then we created that, right? So, but think about it, right? Think about what you're building. Does it work for everyone? If not, why? Right? Think about the people who are gonna use your product, who can access it, but more importantly, who can't. Think about the problem that you're trying to solve. Literally, what's the worst that can happen? Think about that, and then think how you can prevent it. Think about the solution that you're exploring. What if it's used by different people than you intended, or what if someone gets a hold of it that can use it for different reasons? What if it's used completely different than you ever thought, right? You have to pay attention to these things. So what can we do, right? We're designers. How can we think about things to ensure that we're helping to improve things rather than making them worse or flat out destroying them? So, transparency. It sounds like it's so difficult and so easy at the same time, right? Like, it's a mix. It's how can we be so transparent? If you're gonna collect data, let people know. Let them know what you're collecting. Let them know what you're gonna use it for. Apple just created those privacy label nutritional ingredients. That's kind of cool, right? Now understand that people have different levels of tolerance for transparency. Me, I don't give a shit. Like, I've got, in one room, I've got my whatever they call the HomePod now, the little one. HomePod Mini plus the whatever little Amazon thing I have, whatever. And then I got another Google Home in the same room, like literally on the same table. I got that shit. I don't care that it listens to me. I want a personalized experience. But like my dad's like, get that shit away from me. It's listening to what I'm saying, right? So we have to understand that when people think about what level of tolerance is acceptable to them. It's like a stereo, right? Some people want to turn that shit up to 11, and other people want to dial it down to like 3 or 4. So you have to build that into your product. And then think about how people intend to use their products and how you meet their needs. We have an obligation as designers to create products that are intuitive, that are safe, that are free from life-threatening errors, right? Usability. And then we've got to be equitable and flexible. We have to design to accommodate those users that have those different abilities and their individual preferences. And have good intentions, be well-intentioned, put the well-being of others before your place of employment, right? Being able to help people is a great opportunity, but when you can actually help them, that's a privilege, that's the reward. And we're designers, which we use a process that's a lot like the scientific method. We make assumptions. Remember that these are just assumptions, they have limitations. We want to be proven wrong. We want to test our assumptions. When we have those unknowns, that helps us really solve problems for people. All right, 58, 55, 44%. Those numbers meant nothing. That was literally me garbling, like that's bullshit, right? By itself. But if I said it's 58 degrees, it's 55 minutes after the hour, and I don't know what the other number I said was. Even when it's relevant, that data, remember, it doesn't have a moral compass. So let's not be data driven. Let's not solely rely on data to make decisions for people. Let's be informed by that data, but let's keep that human side to make sure that what we're doing is right. And then seek to minimize errors, right? Embrace the people that make mistakes. Help them feel appreciated. Help them learn from their mistakes, and let us learn from their mistakes as well. And of course, we're designers. We talk about being human-centered, right? Human is a fucking weird word. Let's be people-centered. Put people in the center of our process of what we do. Work with them, understand their needs, whether they're articulated or unarticulated. Be empathetic, right? We always talk about empathy. Really develop that relationship with people so that we can continue to help them. And embrace diversity. Be welcoming and encouraging of people who come from different backgrounds than you. Make space at the table and amplify those voices that are the softest in the room. We know that diversity leads to better outcomes, better solutions, and better products. It leads to better design. Kim Goodwin says, worry less about design and more about human-centered decisions. Makes sense. Remember those data breaches I talked about earlier? I mentioned they may not be related to design. Well, it turns out that they very well could have been related to design. Mike Montero says, everyone remembers the monster, but they call him by his maker's name. What you don't want to be is that designer, that product, that organization that's associated with creating something unsustainable, that's associated with creating something inaccessible, unethical, unsafe, or irresponsible, right? Thanks. But, no. Again, this was my first time speaking in front of people in over 2 years. So I want to thank you, really thank you for being here. The faces, the responses, the reactions. I don't get that shit on Zoom, so I'm soaking it up for a second. Also, I gotta plug some shit, right? So I have a podcast. So if what I said relates to you in any way, if designing responsible products is something you're passionate about, Lisa Welchman, who wrote a great book on digital governance called Managing Chaos, her and I have a podcast that comes out every 2-ish weeks where we talk to different people who have created things in the digital space. Check it out wherever you want. All right, by the way, we're also hiring at Rocket. If you want to do some cool shit, if you really want to make a difference for people, come join us. So, thanks. I'm really done this time. Thank you.